On Law Weekly today, we discuss issues of freedom of speech and particularly press freedom. We have the views of a senior advocate of Nigeria, Adegboruwa. We also have the views of some lawyers on their experiences with the Nigerian police and the Nigerian Correctional Service, plus our weekly recap of the top trending stories from the courtrooms. Hello and welcome to the program. I am Shola Sheyeli. On October 10, 2019, the Minister for Information, Mr. Lai Mohammed, at the inauguration of the National Broadcasting Commission Reform Implementation Committee in Abuja, spoke about some recommendations the executive made for strengthening the NBC's regulatory role. Here's what he said.
Following deliberations at the Federal Executive Council of March 27, 2019, on the unprofessional and unethical conduct of some broadcast stations, especially before and during the last general elections, President Muhammadu Buhari directed me to institute an inquiry into the conduct of the stations and report back to the council. Consequently, I inaugurated a 5-member committee. The committee submitted its report on April 24, 2019, with 26 recommendations, and I subsequently forwarded the report to Mr. President, who has since approved them. Highlights of the recommendations approved by Mr. President are as follows. A. Independence of the NBC from political interference in the exercise of its regulatory powers, particularly with respect to the issuance and withdrawal of broadcasting license. B. A review of the National Broadcasting Code and extant broadcasting laws to reflect the following amendments among others. 1. Upward review of fines from 500,000 to 5 million naira for breaches relating to hate speeches, inciting comments, and indecency. 2. Willful repeat of infractions on 3 occasions after levying fine on a station to attract suspension of license. 3. Upgrade of breach of political comments relating to hate speeches and divisive comments to Class A offense in the Broadcasting Code. 4. Amendment of the NBC Act to enable NBC licensed web TV and radio stations, including foreign broadcasters, beaming signals into Nigeria. We are now at the implementation stage. Hence, I have appointed 7 wise men and women to design the framework for the implementation.
However, there are those who think that there is a need to rethink these recommendations, especially because it may impede freedom of speech of citizens, and particularly the press. One of such persons is Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Adegboruwa. In this interview, I began by getting Mr. Adegboruwa's thoughts on the Information Minister's recommendations.
The proposed amendment to the Nigerian Broadcasting Commission Code, as highlighted by the Honorable Minister of Information, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, being the summary of the Federal Executive Council meeting, is to the effect that a panel was set up which has made far-reaching recommendations. Part of those recommendations is to top up the sanctions to be imposed on airing broadcast organizations from 500,000 to 5 million. I think that that sounds punitive, and also the capacity of executive arm of government to impose sanctions without hearing from the parties affected, without the sanction of law, without due process of pleadings and trial, is called to question, because under Section 6 of the Constitution, powers of resolution of disputes, imposition of sanctions are reserved for the courts of the land. And given the economic situation in the country presently, I think it may be a little bit quite draconian to ask organizations that cannot boast of resources to cough out 5 million naira. And then the other aspect about the proposed amendment is the issue of what constitutes hate speech, for which the NBC is to be empowered to sanction media organizations. The right to determine issues amounting to verdict on organizations is clearly judicial. That discretion is not supposed to be exercised by the executive arm of government. For instance, if you say that I've issued any statement that constitutes a libel, you need a judicial approval for anybody to say that something constitutes libel, hate speech, or fake news. It's only for the courts to determine. You may say it's hate speech, I may say it's not. You may say it's libel, I may say it's not. So that power should be left in the hands of the court. But far and wide, beyond these ones, is the issue of suspension of license of broadcast organizations. You know, this is a vested interest. Somebody applied for a particular license, set up an organization, has invested, bought land, bought equipment, recruited staff, you know, and there are contracts that are existing for adverts. So it's quite it should be in the extreme circumstances when you talk about suspension or revocation of license of a broadcast organization. And I think when matters like this are to be taken into consideration, the government should carry along the major stakeholders who are involved in this profession, especially the Nigerian Union of Journalists, the Nigerian Guild of Editors, the National Association of Newspaper Proprietors Association, the Broadcast Organization, and the various other stakeholders and civil society organizations before such bill could even be proposed, even before it is tabled before the National Assembly. So I think that the motive of all this is clearly reflective of the nature of intolerance of the ruling party and the government itself to criticisms and alternative opinions. And I think in a democracy, opposition should be allowed to thrive, and indeed the media should be given its pride of place in holding government accountable to its policies and to the people of Nigeria. So to that extent, I believe the proposed amendment should be viewed on a second hand with a view to reducing those proposed draconian amendments to the code, and then also carry along the stakeholders before that bill is ever proposed.
You talk about motive, tolerance. We've seen a recent clampdown on journalists, talking about the case of Sowore, Agba Jalingo, and even recently threats to arrest the undercover journalists who authored stories on the rots in the police and the prison system. Can these arrests be justified under any means?
Well, I think that looking through the ground norm, which is the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended, Section 39 grants every citizen and also every organization the freedom of expression. And this freedom is quite elaborate in terms of the capacity to disseminate information, to air your views, to make statements. And I think that from where we have come in the history of the democratic struggle of our people, we shouldn't be in this position where we seek to limit or gag the voices of dissent, as it were. So to me, it's like a drawback, generally, when we come to a stage where people are afraid to talk, when we come to a stage where people are persecuted based on political opinions expressed, which seems to be contrary to the one held by those who are in the ruling party. So to that extent, I think that it's quite unfortunate what we are seeing in the country now, where expressing a view to ask for a change, such as done by Mr. Moyele Sowore, the publisher of Sahara Reporters and also presidential aspirant of the Action Alliance, is quite in the extreme, if you ask me. Knowing that Mr. Sowore does not have an army, He does not possess weapons or guns. We could not translate a mere call for a rally or peaceful protest to treasonable felony. It's taking it in the extreme. And I think the government should take a second look at that charge, having regard to the circumstances of that declaration. I don't think anybody ever believed that Mr. Sowore has the capacity to topple or planned to topple this government.
Not even with the use of the word revolution?
No, no. As we have pointed out severally, the word revolution is being used even by the president himself while he was leading a protest in Kano. The word revolution has also been employed by several other artists, even in their music or in plays and dramas. I think that we should give a sense of tolerance, because when I look at the manifesto of the All Progressive Congress, there's a particular provision that seeks to allow people to express their view and to allow opposition to thrive. So to that extent, I think we're going back to the days of Decree 2, when merely expressing an opinion could land you in jail. And I think what is happening in Cross River State is actually the extreme of intolerance. When Mr. Agba Jalingo is now facing terrorism charges for criticizing the governor of the state and asking for transparency and accountability in the finances of the state. And I think that it's our responsibility to call on government that democracy thrives when there is freedom of expression. And the Constitution has granted that right. We should be allowed to express it. And my own view is that if the government thinks that anybody has made a statement which is capable of inciting the public, or which is capable of putting the government in bad light, there are several laws in our lands to bring people to book, laws relating to libel, laws relating to defamation of character and criminal libel. But to equate freedom of expression and peaceful protest to treasonable felony, terrorism, as to make it a capital offense, is to actually impose terror on the people and give a sense of captivity, such that, you know, it's as if we are in some kind of open prison where nobody is allowed to talk. And I don't think that is warranted in the light of the struggles of our people to achieve democracy and freedom. I think the government should allow the people to express their right. We are also signatories to several instruments internationally. The United Nations Charter, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and several other charters which have granted the people the express right to disseminate information here and there. I think it's in the extreme, if you ask me. Talking
about global best practices, how are issues like this generally treated?
When you look at what is going on in the United Kingdom, especially in respect of the Brexit debate, you will see the level of tolerance that the Prime Minister has demonstrated. He was queried in respect of even his relationship, and he openly defended it, you know, and journalists every day will call him to order. And this is why Section 22 was inserted into our Constitution, you know, where it says that the press shall hold government accountable. To hold somebody accountable is to keep him on his toes, to interrogate his policies, to investigate. And that's why I was surprised that when somebody went and made a lot of revelations about what's going on in the correctional service centers across the land, I thought government should actually honor him and give an award, just like the BBC lady Modic has done. I don't think we should get to a situation whereby the government should give the impression that there's anything to hide, because transparency should be the order of the day. Government of the people, for the people, by the people is democracy. And with the promulgation of the Freedom of Information Act, the impression government has given to the people is that we're open. Ask us anything that you seem not to be clear about, and we'll make it known to you. And now we're not asking, and there are people who are finding out. We should commend those people. So I think global best practices, both in the United Nations and the America and United Kingdom, is to allow the people access to government. And you know, the government also gave out the policy of whistleblowers to say, look, go into any organization, if you discover any wrongdoing, come and tell us, we will pursue it. So I don't think that it's proper, because that would defeat that policy of whistleblowing. If people who are conducting undercover journalism are now being threatened with sanctions and prosecution, it will defeat that purpose.